You think you are seeing reality, but what if you are only seeing the version your brain was able to build? Not the world as it is, not the truth in its pure form, but a translation, a prediction, an edited experience. Light touches your eyes, vibrations reach your ears, pressure reaches your skin, molecules become taste and smell, and somehow, inside the darkness of your skull, those signals become a world, a face, a room, a voice, a threat, a memory, a self. You do not experience this as construction, you experience it as reality. And that is the strange part, because your senses are not windows, they are translators. Your brain is not a camera. It is not passively recording what is outside of you. It is predicting, filtering, comparing, filling in the gaps, and deciding what matters before you consciously notice anything. This is why two people can stand in the same room, hear the same words, look at the same face, and live inside completely different realities. One feels peace, another feels rejection. One sees possibility, another sees danger. The signal may be similar, but the interpretation is not. So when we say, "You don't see reality," we are not saying reality does not exist. We are saying something more disturbing. Reality may exist outside of you, but the reality you live inside is built within you. And once you understand that, the question changes. It is no longer only, what is the world? It becomes, what part of the world am I actually seeing? And what part is my brain creating before I even notice? Now, to understand why this matters, we have to look at the senses in a different way. Most of us imagine them as openings. The eyes open, and the world comes in. The ears listen, and sound arrives. The skin touches, and reality is confirmed. But the senses do not give you reality. They give your brain fragments: light, vibration, pressure, temperature, chemical traces, movement. And from those fragments, the brain has to build meaning. Vision feels like the most obvious proof that we are seeing the world as it is. But your eyes do not actually see objects. They receive light. Your brain creates color, shape, depth, distance, and motion. It organizes edges and shadows into a face. It turns contrast into a room. It turns movement into intention. This is why you can see a face in the clouds, a figure in the dark, or danger in a shadow before you know what you are looking at. The brain does not wait for perfect information. It guesses, it predicts, it completes the picture. And most of the time, you never notice the guess because the guess feels like the world. Sound works the same way. Your ears do not hear meaning. They receive vibration. Air moves, the eardrum responds, signals travel inward, and the brain turns vibration into language, tone, music, warning, insult, tenderness. A simple sentence like, "We need to talk," is not just sound. To one person, it may feel neutral. To another, it may feel like danger entering the room. The words are the same. The nervous system is not. A short message, a delayed reply, a certain tone of voice, a silence that lasts a little too long. None of these things carry one fixed meaning. They are interpreted through the body that receives them. Touch is just as revealing. A hand on your shoulder can feel comforting when it comes from someone you trust. The same pressure can feel invasive when your body does not feel safe. The signal may be almost identical, but the meaning changes everything. The breath changes, the muscles change, the face changes, the story changes. And smell may be the strangest of all, because it can open a door in the mind before language arrives. A perfume can bring back someone you thought you had forgotten. The smell of rain, coffee, wood, medicine, a kitchen, a room from childhood. Suddenly the present is not just present anymore. It has become layered with memory. This is the point. Perception is never only sensory, it is biographical. The world arrives through the senses, but it is received by a nervous system that has a history. By the time you say, "I am seeing this," the brain has already selected, ignored, compared, predicted, and organized. It has asked quiet questions beneath language. Is this familiar? Is this useful? Is this dangerous? Does this matter? Have I felt this before? And most of the time you do not hear the question. You only experience the answer. This is why illusions are so important. An optical illusion does not show that the brain is broken. It shows that the brain is active. It is trying to make sense of incomplete information by using context, memory, expectation, and probability. The illusion simply makes the editing visible. It catches the brain in the act. And once you understand that, everyday life starts to look different. You realize that certainty is not always proof of truth. Sometimes certainty is only the emotional texture of a prediction your brain has decided to trust. You can feel certain that someone is angry because their face looked distant. You can feel certain that something bad is coming because your body is already tense. You can feel certain that a new situation will end badly because it resembles an old disappointment. And in each case, the brain may not be trying to lie to you. It may be trying to protect you. Survival has never required perfect truth. Often it required speed. If something moved in the dark, the safer brain did not wait patiently for philosophical clarity. It prepared the body. It assumed danger. It completed the picture quickly. That ability kept human beings alive. But in modern life, the same ancient intelligence can trap us. The tiger in the dark becomes an unread message. The unknown sound becomes a social threat. The unfamiliar face becomes judgment. The future becomes a place where old pain is expected to repeat. So your brain gives you the most useful version of reality it can build in that moment, using the signals available, the memories it carries, and the fears it has learned to respect. And this is where humility begins. Not weakness, not self-doubt, but the quiet maturity of realizing that your first perception may not be the whole truth. The world you experience is not only what entered your senses, it is what your brain believed those signals were becoming. The next layer is even stranger, because the brain is not only interpreting what arrives, it is also predicting what should arrive before the signal is complete. In other words, you are not only reacting to the world. Part of you is constantly anticipating it. This is one of the most powerful ideas in modern neuroscience. The brain is not a passive receiver. It builds a model of reality, then compares that model with the information coming through the senses. If the world matches the model, you move smoothly. If something does not match, the brain corrects, updates, or reacts. This happens so quickly that you rarely feel the prediction. You only feel the result. You open a door and expect the floor to be there. You hear a familiar voice and expect a certain person behind it. You enter a room and immediately sense whether it is safe, tense, warm, cold, inviting, or hostile. Your brain is already ahead of you. It is preparing the body for the next moment before the next moment fully arrives. This is why surprise feels so physical. When something violates your prediction, the body notices. A friend responds in a strange tone. Someone who usually smiles does not smile. A normal sound happens at the wrong time. Attention sharpens. The nervous system leans forward. Something in you says, "Wait, this does not fit." That feeling is the brain detecting a prediction error. The world did not match the model. And now the brain must decide whether to update the model or defend it. This is where perception becomes dangerous, because the brain does not always update easily. Sometimes it protects the old model, even when the present offers new evidence. If someone has learned that people leave, they may perceive distance where there is only busyness. If someone has learned that authority humiliates, they may perceive correction as attack. If someone has learned that love is unstable, they may perceive intimacy as danger. The present gives a signal. The past gives a prediction. And the prediction can become louder than the signal. This is why we can live inside realities that feel obvious to us but confusing to everyone else. You may say, "I know what I felt." And you did feel it. The deeper question is, did the feeling reveal the truth, or did it reveal the prediction your nervous system was already carrying? The body can be honest without being accurate. Fear can be sincere and still mistaken. Anxiety can be intense and still be based on a future that has not happened. Shame can feel absolute, even when the present moment is not condemning you. This is why perception is so convincing. It comes with breath, muscle, heartbeat, heat, contraction. It does not feel like a theory. It feels like evidence. But the brain is not doing this because it is foolish. It is doing this because it is efficient. If it had to rebuild the world from zero every second, you would not function. So it uses memory, patterns, and expectation. It says, "I have seen something like this before, so I will prepare you for what usually comes next." Most of the time, this helps. You catch a glass before it falls. You understand a sentence before every word is finished. Prediction makes life possible, but prediction also means that the past is always participating in the present. And this is where the bridge to human irrationality begins. We like to believe we make choices because we see clearly and then decide logically. But often, we choose from inside a perception that has already been shaped. We do not only want what is good, we want what feels familiar, safe, urgent, scarce, approved, forbidden, or emotionally charged. We do not only evaluate reality, we evaluate the version of reality our brain has already edited. This is why human beings can be predictably irrational. Not because we are stupid, but because we are embodied. We are pattern-seeking creatures with nervous systems built for survival, not objectivity. We are moved by memory, fear, reward, and expectation, long before we tell ourselves a clean story about why we chose what we chose. So when you look at the world, you are not starting from zero. You are starting from a model made of biology, childhood, culture, pain, desire, language, and repeated experience. The model is not the enemy. It is the reason you can move through life at all. But if you never question it, the model becomes a prison. You mistake the prediction for the truth. You mistake the familiar for the real. You mistake the body's alarm for certainty. And slowly, without noticing, you begin living in the world your nervous system expected to find. That is why awareness matters. Not because awareness makes you perfectly objective, it does not. But awareness gives you a small space between signal and story, between what happened and what your brain immediately said it meant. And sometimes that tiny space is where freedom begins. There is another layer we almost never notice. You do not only perceive the world through your senses, you perceive it through your nervous system. And your nervous system is not neutral. It has memories, it has alarms, it has places where it relaxes and places where it prepares for impact. This is why the same situation can feel completely different depending on the state of your body. When you are calm, a problem may look like something you can handle. When you are exhausted, the same problem can look like proof that everything is falling apart. When you feel secure, silence can feel peaceful. When you feel unsafe, silence can feel like punishment. The outside world has not necessarily changed, but the internal state has changed. And once the internal state changes, the whole world seems to change with it. This is where perception becomes emotional. The brain is not only asking, "What is this?" It is asking, "Am I safe with this?" And safety is not just a thought, it is a bodily conclusion. It lives in the breath, the jaw, the chest, the stomach, the shoulders, the way your eyes scan a room, the speed of your thoughts. When the body feels safe, reality becomes wider. You can listen. You can question yourself. You can see more than one possibility. But when the body feels threatened, reality narrows. The mind becomes faster, sharper, more defensive. It looks for danger. It looks for proof. It looks for the thing that confirms the alarm. And this is not weakness. This is protection. Your nervous system was not designed first for happiness. It was designed first for survival. It would rather make a false alarm than miss a real threat. So under stress, perception becomes less like a window and more like a spotlight. It selects. It exaggerates. It darkens some things and brightens others. One look can feel enormous. One word can feel fatal. One delay can feel like abandonment. One uncertainty can feel like collapse. And because the body is reacting, the interpretation feels true. This is one of the hardest things to admit. Sometimes what feels like intuition is actually activation. Sometimes what feels like clarity is fear organizing the evidence. Sometimes what feels like certainty is just the nervous system trying to end uncertainty quickly. This is why awareness has to include the body. The brain is inside a body. The body is inside a history. The history is inside a culture. The culture is inside language. And all of this is inside the moment you are trying to understand. So when you look at something, you are never just looking. You are looking from somewhere, from a mood, from a memory, from exhaustion, from a wound, from desire, from a belief about what usually happens to people like you. And this is why changing perception is not as simple as saying, think differently. Sometimes the body has already voted before the thought arrives. The body has already tightened. The body has already remembered. The body has already prepared a story. If you have ever tried to convince yourself that you are safe while your whole body is saying otherwise, you know this. Logic can speak beautifully, but the nervous system does not always obey language. It needs repetition. It needs evidence. It needs breath. It needs time. It needs a different relationship with the present. This is why someone can understand everything intellectually and still feel trapped in the same emotional reality. They know the fear is exaggerated. They know the old pattern is speaking. But knowing is not always the same as perceiving differently. The nervous system has to learn that the present is not the past, and it learns slowly through experience, not just explanation. This is also why beauty matters, art matters, music matters, silence matters, nature matters. Prayer, contemplation, breath, stillness, they matter because they change the state from which reality is perceived. A nervous system in awe sees a different world than a nervous system in panic. Not because the facts disappear, but because the inner posture changes. And maybe this is why modern life feels so unreal to so many people. We are overstimulated, interrupted, compared, and asked to react before we have had time to truly perceive. The nervous system is flooded, and then we wonder why reality feels distorted. But maybe distortion is exactly what happens when the body never has time to return to presence. Maybe we do not need more information first. Maybe we need a slower body, a quieter mind, a wider attention. Because when the nervous system softens, perception changes. The same room can feel different. The same problem can become smaller. The same silence can become spacious. This does not mean reality has changed. It means the instrument through which reality is being experienced has changed. If the senses show us that reality is translated, and the nervous system shows us that reality is emotional, then the next question is deeper. What happens to time? Time may be the most invisible part of perception. We treat it like something neutral, measured by clocks and calendars. But the body does not live time as a number. The body lives time as experience. 1 minute of fear can feel longer than an hour of peace. A beautiful afternoon can disappear before you notice it. A painful memory can remain alive for decades. A future that has not happened can already make your chest tighten today. So time is not only something you count. Time is something your nervous system interprets. This is where ancient cultures become interesting. They did not always treat time as an empty line moving forward. They treated time as rhythm, pattern, quality, recurrence. In the Maya tradition, the Tzolk'in was a sacred 260-day count made by combining 20-day signs with 13 numbers. Each day was not just a date, it carried a quality, a symbolic tone, a place inside a larger cycle. Modern clocks ask, "What time is it?" But symbolic calendars ask something more mysterious. What kind of time are we inside? That question changes everything. A day is not experienced only by its position on a calendar. It is experienced through the body that enters it, the memory it activates, the expectation it carries, the pattern it seems to repeat. In this sense, time can feel almost fractal. Patterns inside patterns. A morning that repeats a childhood feeling. A season that carries the same emotional weather every year. A relationship that recreates an old story with a new face. The same shape appearing at different scales. Not because time is literally mystical, but because human beings perceive time through patterns. We remember what usually comes after a certain tone, a certain silence, a certain kind of change. And the brain uses those patterns to predict what this moment means. So when you look at the present, you may think you are seeing now. But often you are seeing now through the architecture of before. This is why the past can disguise itself as reality. It does not always come as a clear memory. Sometimes it comes as a mood, a contraction, a suspicion, a certainty, a familiar heaviness in the body. You are standing in the present, but your nervous system is reading it as part of an older cycle. A message left unanswered becomes every time you felt forgotten. A disagreement becomes every time love felt unsafe. A new opportunity becomes every time hope disappointed you. The present gives you a signal. The past gives you a pattern. And the mind says, "I know what this is." But maybe it only knows what this resembles. This is why healing perception is not only about seeing more clearly, it is about interrupting the automatic repetition of meaning. It is noticing when the present is being forced into an old shape. It is asking, is this happening now? Or is my nervous system completing the cycle before life has had a chance to surprise me? That question matters because prediction can become destiny when it is never questioned. If you expect rejection, you may read distance everywhere. If you expect failure, you may treat uncertainty as evidence. If you expect betrayal, you may search for signs until your body finds them. Once the body finds them, the story becomes stronger. This is how a pattern protects itself. It teaches perception what to look for, and then perception brings back proof. But the proof may not be truth. It may be selected reality, edited reality, a world filtered through an old expectation. This is why time belongs in a conversation about perception. You are not only seeing space through your senses, you are seeing time through memory. You are interpreting the present through cycles your body has learned to expect. And maybe this is why the ancient idea of time as quality still speaks to us. It reminds us that every moment has texture. Every moment has psychological weather. Every moment is entered by a person carrying a history. But it also asks a liberating question. If this is a pattern, does it have to keep repeating? If time can feel fractal, then awareness can become the interruption. A slower breath before reacting. A pause before believing the fear. A willingness to let this moment be new. That is not escapism. It is perception becoming less automatic. It is the nervous system learning that not every familiar feeling is a prophecy. Sometimes the past is loud, but it is not always wise. Sometimes the body remembers, but the present is not asking you to obey the memory. And sometimes reality begins to change, not because the world rearranges itself, but because you stop forcing the present to become a repetition of what wounded you before. And this brings us to the most uncomfortable part of perception. Not everything that feels real is true. That sentence is hard to accept because the body does not experience fear as an idea. It experiences fear as reality. The heart speeds up, the breath changes, the muscles prepare. The stomach tightens. The mind begins collecting evidence. And once the body reacts, the story becomes harder to question. You do not think, my nervous system is producing an interpretation. You think, this is what is happening. Fear feels real because the body responds to it as if it were real. But that does not mean fear is always telling the truth. Anxiety can be honest about your state without being accurate about your future. Shame can be honest about your wound without being accurate about your worth. Anger can be honest about your pain without being accurate about the whole story. This is where science and spirituality begin to touch without becoming the same thing. Neuroscience can show us how perception is constructed, predicted, filtered, and embodied. But spiritual traditions often ask a different question. If perception can be distorted, what is real beneath the distortion? A Course in Miracles begins with one of its most famous lines. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. At first, this sounds like theology, but it is also a radical statement about perception. In that framework, what is real is what does not disappear when fear enters the room. Love, truth, spirit, the eternal. What is unreal is what rises and falls inside the mind. Fear, ego, anxiety, the temporary images that feel convincing and then collapse. Whether you approach that spiritually or psychologically, it points to something profound. Much of what threatens us is not the present moment itself. but the meaning our perception has placed on it. We are not only afraid of what is happening, we are afraid of what the past says this means. Someone does not answer, and the body says, "I am being abandoned." Someone disagrees, and the body says, "I am not safe." Something changes, and the body says, "I am losing control." The event may be real, the sensation may be real, the pain may be real, but the final interpretation may still be incomplete. Fear does not usually announce itself as fear. It arrives wearing the costume of reality. It says, "This is obvious." It says, "This is who you are." It says, "This is how life always goes." And because fear speaks with the urgency of survival, love can sound too quiet to trust. Peace can sound unrealistic. Patience can feel unsafe. A softer interpretation can feel dangerous. But maybe that is because the nervous system has confused intensity with truth. The loudest perception is not always the truest one. Sometimes the most truthful thing in you is quiet because it does not need to defend itself. This does not mean pain is fake. It does not mean the body does not suffer. It does not mean difficult circumstances do not matter. A mature spiritual view cannot become a way of denying human experience, but it can ask us to separate the event from the identity we build around it, the feeling from the conclusion, the wound from the self, the fear from the truth. Maybe peace begins when you stop giving ultimate reality to every fearful interpretation your nervous system produces. Maybe peace is not escaping the world, but learning to see where fear has edited the world before you entered it. Because if perception can be edited by fear, it can also be clarified by awareness. It can be softened by breath. It can be widened by love. It can be interrupted by a single honest question. Am I seeing what is here, or am I seeing what I have been taught to fear? That question does not solve everything, but it creates space. And space is where the old pattern begins to lose authority. For a moment, you are no longer completely inside the interpretation. You are observing it. You are noticing the body. You are hearing the story. The perception is still there, but it is no longer the whole of reality. The fear is still speaking, but it is no longer the only voice in the room. And maybe this is what awakening begins to feel like. Not a dramatic escape from the human condition. Not a perfect vision without filters. But a quiet ability to say, "This feels real. But is it true?" Because the moment you can ask that question, you are no longer merely living inside the edited world. You are beginning to see the editor. If you are still here with me near the end of this video, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel and stay with us in this exploration. Not for quick answers, not for noise, but for the kind of reflection that makes reality feel slightly less automatic. Because if this subject has stayed with you until now, it probably means you already sense that life is not only about what happens outside, it is also about the invisible system through which you experience what happens. And that system can be observed, it can be softened, it can become more honest. So let's go one step deeper. Because once you realize your brain edits reality, the goal is not to become suspicious of everything you see. That would only create another prison. The goal is not to walk through life thinking, "Nothing is real, nothing can be trusted, my mind is lying to me." That is not awakening. That is exhaustion wearing a philosophical coat. The goal is more subtle. It is to become intimate with the process of perception. To notice how quickly your mind turns sensation into story. To notice how quickly the body turns uncertainty into threat. to notice how quickly the past enters the room and calls itself intuition. This kind of noticing is not dramatic. It does not always feel mystical. Sometimes it is very ordinary. You receive a message and feel your chest tighten. Instead of immediately believing the fear, you pause. You ask, what did I actually receive and what did my nervous system add? Someone looks distant, and instead of building an entire reality from one expression, you pause. You ask, is this evidence? Or is this a prediction? A memory returns, and instead of letting it define the present, you ask, is this moment asking me to respond? Or is the past asking me to repeat? These questions are small, but they are not weak. They are interruptions. And interruption is powerful because every old pattern depends on speed. Fear needs you to react quickly. Shame needs you to identify quickly. Anxiety needs you to believe the future before it arrives. But awareness slows the mechanism. It creates a space between the signal and the story. And in that space, perception becomes less automatic. You may still feel the fear. You may still feel the contraction. You may still feel the old certainty rising in the body. But now there is another voice in the room, a quieter one, a voice that says, wait, let me see clearly before I obey this. That moment matters, because the nervous system learns through experience. Every time you pause before believing the old interpretation, you teach the body that not every familiar feeling is a command. Not every alarm is prophecy. Not every memory is wisdom. And this is where reality begins to open again. Not because the world suddenly becomes perfect, but because your perception becomes less enslaved to its first reaction. You begin to notice the difference between sensation and meaning, between pain and identity, between uncertainty and danger, between silence and rejection, between change and collapse. You begin to see that many of the things you called reality were actually conclusions. Fast conclusions, protective conclusions, old conclusions. And some of them may have helped you once. Some of them may have saved you once. But what saved you in one season can imprison you in another. A child who learned to scan the room may become an adult who cannot rest. A person who learned to expect disappointment may call it realism. A nervous system that learned to survive chaos may mistrust peace because peace feels unfamiliar. And this is why healing is not only about adding new information. It is about allowing the body to experience a new ending. A silence that is not abandonment. A disagreement that is not rejection. A future that is not a repetition. A moment of uncertainty that does not destroy you. Slowly the model updates. Slowly the brain learns that reality is larger than the old prediction. This is not instant, and it should not be forced. There is no need to turn awareness into another performance. The point is not to become perfect at perception. The point is to become honest about it, to see that your mind is not a flawless mirror. It is a living system. It is trying to protect you, guide you, organize you, and sometimes it uses old maps for new territory. So maybe the question is not, how do I finally see reality with no filters at all? Maybe the better question is, can I become aware of the filters I keep mistaking for reality? Because the moment you see a filter as a filter, it loses some of its authority. The world becomes less final. The story becomes less absolute. The fear becomes less divine. And the present, for the first time in a long time, is allowed to be more than a replay. So maybe the question was never simply, what is reality? Maybe the deeper question is, through what am I meeting reality? Because by now we have seen that perception is not a clean window. The senses translate signals. The brain predicts meaning. The nervous system colors the world with safety or threat. Memory bends the present. Time repeats itself through patterns. Fear edits what we notice. And after all of that invisible work has happened, we open our eyes and say, "This is just how things are." But maybe it is not just how things are. Maybe it is how things appear through the system that is trying to protect us. This does not make life meaningless. It makes it more sacred. Because if your experience of reality is partly constructed, then attention becomes responsibility. The way you look matters. The state you live from matters. The stories you repeat matter. The pauses you take before reacting matter. The beauty you allow yourself to notice matters. The silence you enter matters. The words you use to describe your life matter. Not because you can control everything outside of you, but because your experience of the world is not separate from the instrument through which you receive it. And that instrument can be trained, softened, questioned, restored, slowly, honestly. The goal is not to see without any filter at all. Maybe no human being can do that. The goal is to stop confusing every filter with truth. To stop assuming the first feeling is the final reality. To stop treating every fear as prophecy, every memory as wisdom, every old wound as identity. There is a difference between what happened and what your nervous system learned from what happened. There is a difference between pain and the story pain wrote inside you. There is a difference between caution and imprisonment, between intuition and activation. Between reality and the version of reality fear is asking you to obey. And the more you see this, the more humble perception becomes. You begin to understand why people disagree so deeply, why someone can look at the same world and see threat while another sees possibility, why one person hears silence as peace and another hears it as abandonment. We are not only arguing about facts, we are often speaking from different nervous systems, different histories, different wounds, different models of what the world is likely to become. And yet, this does not mean truth is impossible. It means truth requires more than reaction. It requires patience. It requires attention. It requires the courage to ask, what am I adding to this moment? What am I remembering? What am I afraid this means? What if the present is larger than my prediction? That is a quiet kind of freedom. Not loud, not dramatic, but the kind that appears when the old story begins to loosen. When the body feels fear, but you do not immediately call it fate. When a memory rises, but you do not let it govern the room. When uncertainty appears, and you allow it to remain uncertainty instead of turning it into disaster. Maybe awakening is not seeing a different world. Maybe awakening is seeing the same world with less of the past standing in front of it. Less fear speaking over it, less ego naming it too quickly, less urgency to turn every signal into a conclusion. And maybe peace begins there. Not in denying the body, not in pretending pain is unreal, not in floating above human experience, but in remembering that the deepest truth in you may not be as threatened as fear says it is. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. If that is even partly true, then the work of perception is also the work of remembering. Remembering what does not collapse when the mind panics. Remembering what remains when the story changes. Remembering that love is quieter than fear, but not weaker. So the next time something feels absolutely real, pause, not to deny it, just to look again. Ask what entered through the senses. Ask what the body added. Ask what the past predicted. Ask what fear edited. Ask what love can still see. Because you may not see reality directly, but you can become more conscious of the way reality is being translated through you. And sometimes, that is enough to let the world breathe again. If this video gave you even one moment of recognition, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Share it with 5 people who would understand this kind of question. And leave a sincere comment below. What part of your reality have you recently started to question? Also, tell me what subject you want us to explore next. Because sometimes the beginning of wisdom is not finding certainty. Sometimes it is realizing how much of what we call reality was only the first version we believed.